Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen of Gig Nation, and welcome to another live Q&A call. It is July 29th, 2025. I'm your host, James Cronk, and I know it's got to be a busy time for many of you. It's in the middle of the golf season for many. It's also a time of reflection and getting some rest for others. In some other parts of the world and North America. But no matter what's going on in your business right now, I'm so glad that you're either joining us live or you're going to watch this recorded, because I'm very excited about having our guest on today, Mr. Pat Kelley, partner of Advanced Golf Partners. I saw Pat do a session at a Golf Inc. Summit many months ago. Talked about sales culture, talked about creating motivations for your team to increase sales, which I loved his story and his message. And then recently we connected at the Multi-Course Owners Retreat in Monterey, California, and had a chance to hear some of Pat's stories and not to mention learn about his love for watches. But we won't talk about that today. What we are going to talk about, though, is some of Pat's experience. So without further ado, Scott, let's bring on our guest today, Mr. Pat Kelley, partner with Advanced Golf Partners. And Pat, thank you so much for joining Gig Nation today. I really have enjoyed hearing from you, learning from you, listening to some of your experiences in the industry. And I know that you're going to be able to share some wisdom with our listeners today, no matter what part they are in their own personal journey. But Pat, before I start asking about how to increase sales and how to develop partnerships with technology companies and everything else, please share with our listeners a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, James. So actually, I've been around the golf business since the day I was born. My father was a head golf professional. My mother ran the snack bar. This is back when, before the clubhouse opened, they were in the single wide or double wide trailer, and it was one count. You had a snack bar and you had the check-in for the golf shop.
Right.
And I'd go to work and they'd stick me up on the counter right in the middle of the two. So that's when I started being around the golf business, right early on. So at the time, my father's cart mechanic, Larry Galloway, was at Sweetwater, and he went on to have an incredibly successful career with Club Corp and with Century, and then he started Advanced Golf Partners. He's my mentor partner. He's been involved as a revenue strategist for hundreds of clubs in his career, and then he's basically the sensei of our dojo, is what I like to call it. So blessed and fortunate, Larry. My father made me go work on the golf course crew when I was a teenager. Worked in the cart barn in college, and then kind of swore I wasn't going to golf, and ended up coming back into the space back in 2009, working the golf shop counter, just checking people in and selling. And that was at a time when that soft skill set of selling was not a common thing within our industry. We had the fortunate through the 2000s, the Tiger boom, and not necessarily having to do things that generated demand for your product. It was a very interesting time for all of us. So it just was a natural fit, and then it progressed into becoming a GM and then a regional manager, regional VP with Century, and then ended up working with Larry. So.
And I know you've certainly done very well, Pat, in your business ventures, I guess. And what I was very interested in was also, Advanced Golf Partners and kind of the unique way that I think you guys bring value, I guess, to facilities and to investors. And can you maybe just share with our group a little bit about your organization and
Sure.
what aspects of the business that you guys are in and how you participate, I guess, in the golf industry?
Yeah, so we're owner operators. Larry started the group back in 2013. So really, at the end of the day, Advanced Golf Partners is Larry Galloway. I'm just along for the ride, you know. um, but Larry started out with an individual course acquisition. Started to figure out how to raise money vis-a-vis our SBA 504 program here in the U.S. And found investors and structured models, and he was incredibly successful with his first one, which catapulted him onward to additional acquisitions. And then I believe he was right in the middle of doing number 5 and 6, and he called me up and brought me on board 10 years ago. So literally, it was 10 years ago, like right now. I think my official first day was August 1st,
Huh.
2015. So since then, we've been acquiring facilities all over the U.S. And we've probably been involved now in about 20 courses as owners over the last 10 years. So it's been a process of acquisitions, operating. In some cases, we've started to sell off some of the assets as well. So that's been an interesting journey. And then and additionally do a little bit of consulting work via my my consulting company called Deep Dive Golf. So I do some of that outside of the space, and help other operators with technology partnerships, with other industry partnerships that I've created over the years, to help them take advantage of those relationships.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the reasons why I was excited about having you on, Pat, is because, I think sometimes when you work at a club, or you're a GM, or you're a director of golf, or you're an executive chef, or whatever it might be, you're going through the journey of increasing your responsibilities, and you're maybe you become a head professional, or maybe you've then become an assistant GM or a director of golf. I think sometimes you're not aware when you work in the day-to-day about all of the actual possibilities that exist in this golf industry, right? And how
Yeah,
you went from working in a golf shop and a back shop to the counter to selling shoes probably in the golf shop
of course.
to obviously buying and selling golf courses, and being able to afford those beautiful watches that you have. And so, right. And I think that, and this is certainly what I want to bring it back to, because my next question really is about sales. And I've
Hmm.
seen enough of you, Pat, in your talking, in your conversations, and your networking. You're unbelievably charismatic, and I can tell that you got to be a great salesperson, because I can see the way that you engage with people. But when you're talking about our businesses, and how to make our businesses better, or how to grow the value of a business, I assume a lot of it has to do with increasing revenues. And to increase revenues, you got to create a sales culture.
That's
So,
right.
I mean, one of the things I love listening to you talk about in one of your presentations was about the difference between selling golf compared to selling a widget. And so I just wanted to kind of get you to share a little bit with our audience about how does a manager communicate to their people the importance and the value of creating a sales culture, and how selling golf and all the amenities that come with golf,
Yeah.
is a little bit different than selling a quart of milk.
Yeah, it's quite a bit different than that. Well, first of all, it's understanding what you're selling. Start with that, right? Um, frequently you hear people talk about really, your revenue buckets, if you will, uh, quote unquote, green fee, cart fee, revenue, dues revenue, merchandise revenue, so on and so forth. And so, what are you selling? Are you selling green fees and cart fees? Are you selling 18 holes of golf? I subscribe to the idea that no, we're selling time. We sell the access to that first tee, on an interval, whether it's anywhere between 7 and 10 or 11 minutes apart, depending on, the layout of the golf course. Um, and it's a perishable thing that we're selling. Once it's gone, it's gone. And I think for me, when I was working that counter, and was taught by a different group of guys to have some urgency about getting that time sold. Um, and then getting on board with Larry at Century and all the things that we had to do, whether it was email specials that went out or we were doing web specials or we were trying to figure out every lever that we could pull to sell this time. Um, what's interesting when you understand that you're selling time is you understand how people's pattern of life works, right? So then you need to understand your inventory and the differences of your inventory. All right. Meaning, what's my apex inventory? We all have it seasonally, plus time of day, day of the week, right? What's my shoulder inventory? So, apex inventory, you're going to sell at a very high utilization rate. And in fact, you might even have over demand for that inventory. Shoulder, you typically don't have full demand for it, but you got some pretty solid demand and utilization for that space. And then you've got kind of your non-peak inventory that I would call it, has a much typically lower utilization rate. Um, it got real easy for us to sell a lot of rounds of golf and have a high utility when people had the availability of time all of a sudden during the pandemic, right? Those weekday tee times that were difficult to move in the afternoon all of a sudden were very easy to move.
Mhm.
And prior to that, we had to figure out all sorts of things to do to try to sell that inventory to a customer set that wasn't even really available to play it, you know? So that's kind of when you come back around to the selling of golf thing. The name of our breakout that we did in Orlando was called Selling Hope. Um,
Right.
so you're talking to a guy when he's there, perhaps he's there during your apex hours, but you're talking to him about having a membership product that's very easy to sell in 45 seconds that gives him a tremendous access to that other stuff that he might not be able to use, but he thinks he might. And that's the trick of it. That's the trick of it.
Do you find what do you think is different today? Rounds of golf up 21% because of the pandemic. I always like to say if you were broken before COVID, you're still broken. Like if you were desperate, when discounting and looking at 50% off green fees before COVID, and you haven't drastically changed your sales, your marketing, your culture, your experience, your amenity, whatever, and you're up 20%, well, you better be concerned about the next 5 years. So what what do you see now? Now that we're a year past kind of the peak, I guess, of the pandemic, of the gold rush of post-pandemic golf. There's obviously trends that are great. We're obviously enjoying more waiting lists and more golf and more rounds.
Sure. Mhm.
But as you look forward from that kind of selling hope and that kind of sales culture, do you feel like the golf industry is taking advantage of this growth? Do you feel like we're learning these sales skills, that we're learning this utilization? I mean, there's some golf courses that don't even do yield management, with talking about their peak and their non-peak and their shoulder and their variety of pricing. So what advice would you give, I guess, an operator about taking advantage of this current environment, and
Mhm.
and also what are some of the most important, do you think, KPIs and levers that you want to be aware of
Mhm.
in operating your, let's talk about daily fee public resort facilities kind of thing.
Yeah. I'd say start with the facility. That to me was something that we really doubled down on when we had the resources to really invest back into the courses, the clubhouses, um, freshen up these clubhouse spaces, make your course great, look relevant to the new customer set that's coming in.
Mm-hmm.
um, I think has been probably a very important thing. You look at a lot of our facilities; they're rather dated sometimes. Um, so that's one place to start. Golf course conditioning. It's something I'm very passionate about. Um, Great greens. I always tell my superintendent the first day I meet him, there's no budget for your greens. You can't screw that up. I don't want to hear any excuses that you didn't have money for a fungicide application, and now I'm looking at Pythium or something. So that to me, and understanding what great greens are, what metrics am I looking at? I'm looking at my stent meter or we purchased that USGA G3 golf ball that measures drop test, speed, chatter, ball roll. So
Mhm.
looking at some of those data metrics on the green side of things, and then on the revenue side of things, it's the most important one probably is what I call RevPA, which is revenue per available hour. Is it rounds per se? Not necessarily. I think the KPI, especially when you end up in the owner's chair, is a deposit.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, what do we put in the bank, right?
Right.
Um, so, um, so RevPod typically is the best way to measure, your opportunities here. So what does that mean? Does that necessarily mean I'm driving rounds activity, in such a way that creates a velocity play, that is the way to get to that RevPod, or is it a pricing strategy to improve that, and understanding your market, the demand for your product, and not overpricing it or underpricing it. And that's one thing we've been just ferocious on measuring for years. Is we have reports that get posted on a daily basis that are telling me rounds by segment, by hour, by day, and compared to last year year before, and we're still seeing an uptick. You know, but and then to kind of put an exclamation point on it, converting customers that were just in that brief moment, right? And creating dues revenue out of that customer with subscription style programming, and getting them locked into your facility specifically, so that when the time kind of starts to go down, you got them hooked because you got good products, and you got them hooked because you got them in a wonderful subscription program that's recurring revenue for your business. And in order to get that, you got to have people who know how to speak to people.
So we're gonna okay, thank you. We're gonna get to that speaking of people part in a minute because that's fantastic. But let's get back to subscription revenue because
Yeah.
um, you know, this is a very generalized statement, but I feel like 8 years ago, 7 years ago, we were trying to pre-sell as much golf as we could in the
Sure.
off season through tournaments, through subscription, through leagues, through whatever we possibly could, right? Recognizing that, if we have an annual pass holder with unlimited rounds of golf, and the guy's going to play 40 rounds of golf and net his fee down to $12, we'd rather have his money in the bank, and because we had the inventory.
Mm-hmm.
The last couple of years, we're like, oh my God, I wish I didn't have that guy because
Sure.
I can sell that round of golf for $30 or $50 or $100. And the subscription model, which all of a sudden led to some courses even capping subscription models, getting rid of subscription models.
Well, there's some hybrid ones to it.
Yeah, hybrid
Yeah.
ones. Hybrid's a great example.
Yeah,
So
a hybrid subscription. So
can
yeah.
you share a little bit about your philosophies on the pros and cons, the goods and the bads? Because I believe you're a proponent of subscription revenue streams,
100%. Yep.
right? And
Yep.
so, can you share with our listeners why you're a positive proponent of subscription revenues, as opposed to trying to take your chance maximizing the daily fee?
Sure. So I think, again, going back to kind of understanding the difference in your T sheet inventory, um, and that Apex inventory that you're going to sell if the weather's decent, you know, um, that's the stuff that we kind of try to keep out of the access bucket. And if they do have access to it, it's at the right blended out ADR. We call it average daily rate of dues and green fee, cart fee dollars. That to me is probably the most important thing to understand, is what is the blended ADR for each one of your programs. To your point, the guy that does the math, buys the annual pass, plays you like a bodybuilder, drives his average rate down. Do we have any of those? It certainly is nice to have some of that pop of money, particularly property taxes come due, and we've always kind of been programmed to think that way. And but you're seeing clubs globally right now that are full with wait lists. I know we see it. I know Palm Beach County, for example, which is where we spend part of our time. There you can't get in a club right now for under $100,000. And by the way, you're paying the 100 to get on the wait list.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a really interesting dynamic right now with all these folks coming in. On the private, or excuse me, public and more semi-private side, looking at your tee sheet inventory, looking at when you've got the white space on a tee sheet, packaging that up with some of your practice facilities, something like that. Make it a monthly credit card on file, gym club, month to month, quit anytime type commitment or lack thereof, right? And that's where the sales culture really kicks in, because you don't have people that are 100% kicked in. So you're going to have churn. You're going to have, it's no different than, I got a funny story when, if you ever heard of Planet Fitness, which, makes their model on $10 a month, gym memberships, right?
Yeah.
And they just get a bunch of people to join that don't use it. And I had, my travels took me, it was located next to a grocery store that I didn't really go to very often. And clearly I didn't go to the gym very often. So I show up one day and I noticed the gym has moved in the same plaza. And I asked the lady at the checkout, I said, "Oh, I see the gym moved. How long ago was that?" She goes, "Oh, that was 8 months ago."
Right. Yeah. They got your $80.
Yeah, they got my money. They got my credit card. And it's just every month, it's just ding, ding, ding. And I didn't even walk in the door.
Right.
I think we had one of our clubs is 1,800 subscription members. 200 of them didn't even step foot on property last year.
So what do you have an example that you can describe of a hybrid subscription model that you think has the best success for an owner operator?
Sure. We started this out with most of your late afternoon inventory, and a really low monthly rate. I mean, we started out like literally stupid low, like 20 years ago, like $29, you know, and you get the key to starting low enough is to get critical mass in this group, right? And that way when you do take a $10 dues increase, first of all, they barely notice. And secondly, none of them quit. We send the message out, hey, we're going up a little bit on dues. We've done this X, Y, and Z to the facility, right?
Right.
To justify it. And we don't get anybody to quit and walk off on us. So again, we started out mostly focused on that harder to sell inventory later in the day. And then it's kind of morphed over the years. We've added some of the shoulder inventory and added a premium version of that subscription to a customer. They're willing to pay a little bit more to have more access. And we've even gone so far as to look at what their discount is in our peak inventory, knowing we're going to get them in there. So we price our non-subscription members in such a way that we feel pretty good about what they're paying.
Right.
And
these are unlimited play subscription models, right? So like you have if you have an afternoon membership that's valuable, Monday to Thursday, 2 p.m. onwards or something, at $30 a month or whatever it is, $100 a month.
Anywhere between that. Yeah.
Right. Something like that, right? Where it's like unlimited play. You've got parameters, restrictions around it.
That's right.
You're focusing on a group.
Yep. That's exactly right. And getting a high enough take rate on it to where it matters. I think a lot of clubs, when they really were struggling, and I'm going to go back 10, 15 years ago, some of these clubs that they were private, they were down to like 100 something members, right? Struggling to hang on. And a lot of it's because they aged out. Well, part of that is that they didn't have a large enough overall group that created the referral system to come in to replace them.
Right.
Never made the investments into updating their facilities to attract that golf for the future.
Do you do any subscription? So do you expand that out to the range?
Yep.
You do anything with food and beverage? Do you do anything in?
Yep. So we've done everything from what we call practice, learn, and play to practice, eat, and play. to where, like, we had a facility that had a ton of league activity, right? And the beer leagues on Monday through Thursday. And we needed to give something to them to make it sellable. So we gave them discounts in the restaurant, as an example. As far as the range is concerned, depending on the size of the range, the number of people in your subscription program, we've done everything from unlimited range balls to a bucket a day, to dollar buckets, stuff like that. And then instructional clinics that just really don't get a lot of utilization.
Right. I apologize to Scott, because Scott, I have no idea where this question is in our list, but I'm going to ask it, so don't worry about finding it. But Pat, like, do you use, so one of the data, okay, like, you can't make these decisions without data.
That's right.
And the reality is that lots of facilities don't have the right data or enough data or know where to find the data. It's like, we talk about, if you don't know the number of people coming in your restaurant and you can't calculate dollar per customer, you can't motivate people to sell more desserts and all the blah, 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 blah.
Sure.
So is there a technology, a partner? Is there a platform that you use? Is it an Excel spreadsheet that you've taken with you from site to site to site? Or, like, how do you bring all that data out of the day-to-day and your POS to make those types of decisions effectively? Do you feel like you obviously, I would assume, feel like you guys have the data you need to make those financial decisions?
Sure.
So
Yeah, technology is a very important piece of it. So we partner with Lightspeed on our T-Sheet point of sale. They do have some reporting that gives you some of this information that I'm describing,
right.
whether it's a heat map or utilization percentages and so on and so forth. They've got that information. EasyLinks has that. Most of them have the utilization information available in some report. The other thing that we use as well is looking at a customer leaderboard, or what's called a quintile report, which is the number of times unique players visit and play your facility in a year. And most operators would be astonished at the percentage of golfers that they have that play them on an annual basis, but they play fewer than 2 times a year at their facility. So for the longest time, we started collecting data on asking customers, how many rounds a year do you play golf? 20, 50, 100. Oh, we see, you're and their zip code. We see you live right down the road. You play 50 times a year, and we've only seen you twice. Where do you play?
Right.
Oh, I'm in the senior group over at the course down the street. We play, every Tuesday. And then you look at your business and you go, well, guys, what if I put together an offer for you guys to come see me once in a while? Next thing you know, you got 12 golfers on a monthly basis, and you said, we're going to include lunch. I'm going back when it was hard.
Sure. No, I hear you.
I'm going to include lunch.
It'll be hard again.
If you guys play 12 or 14 times with me, I'll give you all a free pair of golf shoes or something like that, And so that was just some of the things that we looked at from a data perspective, was this customer utilization. How much does those individual customers actually play? And then, to wrap up, yes, we have an Excel spreadsheet that we've been using, and it's been developed. And my partner, Bob Witzel, he's responsible for building that. And he's an analyst for us. We all kind of have an analyst brain to begin with, but he's probably the top one. So, having that information, extracting out of a point of sale, through whatever report, you can make work on your end. There's another firm that I'm just now getting going with called Metolius. They're very good with data, and populating what you're looking for. So, and then there's that little pesky little P&L thing.
Exactly. Well, we talked. We did a podcast with Ross with Metolius, and love what they're doing. And over the years, Pat, you've probably seen this kind of growth and all of these new technology options and partnerships. And we just talk about partnerships for a minute, because you just talked earlier on about using Lightspeed, and we're certainly big fans of Lightspeed and their platforms and what they do. And as consultants, we put Lightspeed into different facilities. But what do you look for? And if you were going to give advice to an owner operator about what are some types of the partnerships that they should prioritize to kind of, help efficiency, help drive revenue. We all talk about our food suppliers. We all talk about our golf cart suppliers, our chemical suppliers. But in the revenue management standpoint, or in the revenue and efficiency standpoint, what are some of the partnerships that you see nowadays that are really helping clubs?
Yeah, you've got several groups now that are coming along with waitlist technology. Whether it's Notify, a group called Squeeze. I think two of the T-sheet providers are now providing it that I know of. We've always kind of had a version of doing it with Lightspeed ourselves on call-in stuff. But yeah, understanding what that waitlist is and driving your decision making during some of your apex hours when you've got more demand than you have product. I can only fit so many people on the golf course. But if I can fit, let's call it 120 people on a golf course, in a 4-hour period, as an example, or 4.5-hour period. Do I have just how many people want that, right? How many want that day part? And come to find out, sometimes you could have probably sold 8 more, 10 more groups, right? But you didn't have anywhere to put them. What does that mean? Look at your pricing, right? I think you're going to start seeing some additional technology out there that's going to allow a customer to decide to pay more than what you think your facility should be worth. So, so pricing with data is like central. You can't price it with your ego. Oh, I'm a $100 golf course. Does the consumer think so? And is there enough of them to justify that?
Let's talk about that. I want to ask you about that, because one of the crazy things about our business is that one day Pebble Beach is now worth $800 a round, and at some point it was worth $500 a round. And we just played Crowbush in Prince Edward Island the other day, which is unbelievable. And at $160 a round, it's an incredible value in Canada and in any part in the world, to be honest. And a buddy of mine told me he played it many, many years ago. It was $35 when he played it, a couple of decades ago. But my point is that, pricing is a supply and demand kind of equation, generally speaking. But we are selling an experience, and to every person that thinks that a golf course is worth $100, there's someone else that thinks it's worth $50. Right. And there might be someone that thinks it's worth $150. Do you have any secret on how you price, things besides the supply and demand equation and things like that? But I mean, sure. How do you kind of determine when's enough, and what do you take up? Like, for example, I'm a big believer that you don't take your price up without having a story to tell people why you take your price up.
Well, let's start with that, right?
And I don't care how simple it is. It could be we got brand new range balls, could be the answer. It doesn't need to be we rebuilt the 15th green. It's just, right. You just got to remind them that you have increasing costs, and it's got to get refunded somehow. But
I think that's where it's gotten easier, to increase price in the last 4 or 5 years here. We've gotten a lot more bullish with it. But typically, start with a goal in mind. How much, how many rounds and how much revenue per hour do you want to do, and how to get to that? Is that through velocity, or is that through, pricing? Yeah, know how much you can sell. know how many rounds you can do. I've got a golf course that's probably in a 60,000 round market, um, that we cap it out at 50 because it's got bent grass greens. You don't want to put that much traffic on those things. We've got golf courses in 18 hole golf courses doing 65, 70,000 rounds of golf. A lot of that's through this subscription dues customer that we find they like to play apparently plenty of golf. Um, so it was a lot of fun there for a while. You'd open up your tee sheets on Monday morning, and you kind of look out during the week, and you're like, oh, sold, 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 sold. You know, you're selling your stuff out well in advance. Like, and By the way, I look at those tee sheets Larry told me, when I got became a regional, Century brought me over to had me stay the night at his house, and he put his laptop on his had one of those home theaters at the time, and we plugged his laptop into the HDMI cord, and he says, this is what you're going to look at every morning for the rest of your life: the weather, your tee sheets, and what we at the time called a TSR, tee sheet report. And so you kind of have to ride that little. It's a rhythm of looking, right, and do it before you go to the course. Do it before you go in, because once you show up, all the distractions start.
Pat, do you I'm not asking you to criticize. I'm trying to, how do I ask this politically correctly?
So
Why do you think the golf industry is a little do you think the golf industry is a little bit slow to adapt to this type of revenue management? And if so, why is that? I think that's the nicest way I can say what I just said.
I've always found, for some reason, our industry likes to be a little slow to the game. I mean, look at how far behind we were the hotel and airline industry and online booking
Right.
adoption. I mean, golfers by nature are a little bit conservative. They take a little time to adapt to change, and don't like it a lot of times. I'd say some of that's driven by, compared to a lot of businesses, we have a disproportionate number of senior players, and those are the ones that are most sensitive to changes, and they're going to talk to you about it. They're plenty good at sharing. So I think start there a little bit. Just awareness in general, education. There's lots of opportunities in this business to get some education. It's not always simply through going into the merchandise show. There's other things out there. If you're a golf course owner, we've got Golf Business Conference in Orlando that piggybacks off the PGA show. If you're anybody in the industry can go to Golf Inc. You got the NGF that's doing a symposium now, and the NGCOA is doing TechCon in coming up in I believe it's in Frisco, Texas this year.
Yeah.
To where there's an introduction to the different technologies that are out there now. So I think for me, and by the way, I will say this: we also have a finite pipeline that we can actually handle all this stuff too. So you got to be very careful and selective on what you are using to run your business, because it can be too much, right?
100%.
So understanding, hey, great golf course conditions are number one, paramount, important to what I need to do. Okay, what are the tools that are available to me right now, and the latest and greatest in that? Number two, pace of play. Incredibly, incredibly important. What technologies are out there to assist you in managing that pace of play experience around the golf course?
Okay, and just expand on that. So just expand on why pace of play is so important from a revenue management standpoint.
It's your production line. It's your production line, and it creates stickiness with your golfer. So if he comes out to your place and has a good pace experience, he's more likely going to come back, and less likely going to put a review on Google or on Golf Advisor blasting you for slow pace of play.
Yeah. 100%.
Um, the reviews I get that put me on blast to the fact that we actually enforce pace of play,
Yeah.
and that we tell someone they were too slow,
Yeah.
and they're not happy with us. And I'm like, I love those. I'm like, oh, thank you for the free advertisement.
Exactly. Everyone else is reading that going, thank God.
Yeah,
Someone's dealing with that guy.
yeah,
You don't see the course ambassador. You don't see the beverage cart. The greens weren't cut that day or the pins weren't changed. I mean,
so
there are,
many things,
sorry,
so many things.
so many things, but there are some basics though. And sorry, let me get back to technology for a minute, because I feel like if your responsibility is to drive revenue, you must have some kind of a waitlist technology. Whether it's Notifier or whatever it might be, right? You got
Hmm.
to have a waitlist technology. You've got to have some way to pull data from your POS system and your T sheet that allows you to make better decisions. And you can go as far as with things like Metolius or the variety of other types of organizations that help organize your data and then spit it back to you in a way that helps you kind of make better decisions, right?
Sure.
I feel like you need to be doing some kind of benchmarking. You got to have
Yeah.
some kind of understanding, whether using club benchmarking or one of the other many benchmarking services that are out there. You've got to have some way to understand that, the average daily rate in your market for your type of golf course at your price point is X, and you're $3 below that, or your food and beverage is $9 a customer and the average is 12, whatever might be the answer, because it's going to expose those operational. If you don't have anyone offering people a hot dog, well, guess what? You're not going to sell many hot dogs.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
let me ask you about that, Pat, because let me ask about this question right here. So when you consider investing in a technology,
Hmm.
is it simply an ROI equation that you kind of go by? What are some of the thoughts that you
Sure.
think operators should use? Because like you said a minute ago, there's a finite time. You can only do so much. We're not all rocket scientists. We're not all mathematicians either. So we've only got so many hours in the day to answer emails and deal with Mrs. and Mrs. Smith. So what
Sure.
what what are your thoughts about that?
So again, I think I go back to what are my most important parts of my business to drive profitability, right? Which is again back to turf, pace of play. Um, we actually exceed people's expectations with our food and beverage offerings. Um, that's another big one. Our practice facility experience has got to be paid attention to as well. What are your targets like? What are you hitting and what are you hitting off of, right? Um, Beverage carts. Do you have one out there? Um, oh, we don't have a beverage cart out there because it's broken down. We finally gave up and started buying two.
Yeah.
And we'll run two, and in the event one of them has to go down, I've still got one running. I'm not just dead in the water and don't have one.
Is there any reason why someone shouldn't have a beverage cart in the golf course? Is there any reason? They talk about the rain. It's the weather today. There's not enough. If we have less than 80 players on the tee sheet, we're not running the beverage cart. I mean, these decisions blow my mind when I hear these decisions. I go, do you know how much a beverage cart person has to sell per hour to actually pay their wage and the fuel to get that thing around a golf course? It's not much.
No, no, I do find it surprising sometimes, and I also find it very interesting, the training that goes into the beverage cart,
For lack
or
thereof.
lack thereof.
Yeah.
Usually you're talking about training a young lady that's probably not even a golfer to drive around um, a golf course
Yeah.
backwards. Do they know what they're doing? Are they going to hold pace to play up? You
Yeah.
know, um, do they have the right mix of product in there? We analyze our product mix. Um, for me personally, I'm kind of try to keep up with the latest and greatest trends that are out there. And so, are the products that we have on the beverage cart in alignment with the current trends, right?
Right.
For an example, seltzers have become incredibly popular.
Yeah.
Of course, beer still wins the day, but the seltzer thing has gotten very popular. Do we have seltzers on the carts? Do we have the most relevant ones that are out there right now that the customers are enjoying? So having a product mix that actually speaks to your customer is also an important part of that, right? So I see that a lot of times, but usually here I didn't see the beverage cart. Well, there's a good chance the beverage cart was out there, but I'll give you a good example. My course that I played down in South Florida, um, when I'm there, the way that the place is laid out, the beverage cart driver can go from the fifth tee to the first green and skip 2, 3, 4. And I see it almost all the time from
Right.
4. I'm sitting over there at 4 watching the beverage cart. I'm like, no, ready
Exactly.
for a transfusion, you know?
Yeah. And I'm sure
So
it's past 11 o'clock, right, Pat? I mean, I know it's past 11 o'clock when you're looking for that transfusion.
yeah, sure it is. Um,
So,
uh,
so let's talk about because I got a couple questions left in the time that we have left, but I want to you in your GBC session, you really talked about motivating the team and the
yeah,
people to sell, and I believe, to me it's like there's some revenue streams that people either are not aware of, don't think of, um, do not realize their contribution that they can provide, and what I loved what you talked about was making everybody a salesperson. Can you just talk about, because I'm assuming that when you guys buy a property, um, you buy it because you recognize that there's revenue that can be increased and
hmm
efficiencies to be made, and investment that can be done that's going to then take that asset from being X number of dollars to Y number of dollars when you sell it, and that's how you pay for your watches. So I am assuming that growing revenues and adding to the bottom line are things that you can see when you're assessing properties. So what do you think are some of the ways that operators could add to their bottom line that they might not be giving enough credit to at the moment?
yeah. So taking an evaluation of your asset. Matter of fact, recently I'm starting to essentially work with a northern property that allows downhill skiing in the wintertime. So are there utilization opportunities of currently underutilized inventory to bundle in to a very affordable gym like membership? You know, and that's for facility by facility decision. So when we go take a look at a club, um, we'll have, this is how we used to do it. We do a little different now, but we'd say to the if we were gotten to the point where we were under agreed upon LOI and PSA and had access to the property, and we'd say to the golf professional, hey, we need you to print every tee sheet off for the last 2 years, you know, and we'd sit there and just look at the tee sheet and look and just keep flipping through the daily tee sheets to get an idea of the rhythm of that property, so that you kind of came down to conclusion saying, all right, here's the access windows for this um, for this dues model that we're going to put together. And again, you got to actually just know your underutilized stuff. Okay. The pros and cons sometimes are giving them too much of your apex inventory, your peak. So it's really just about looking at the information that is available to you, and understanding how to put it together. And then, you know, um, is a thing. I used to do something called PK classes. Now I realize my name's PK, but they're called product knowledge classes. When I was in sales for a Fortune 500 company, and so I'd go into these retail facilities and teach the associates about our product. All right. So that they could then turn around and be on the sales floor in a big box environment and be able to sell what I was offering. Right. Um, Believe it or not, I worked for Levelor and sold blinds and shades. And so I literally would go around teaching people in Lowe's how to use the machine that cuts the width down,
Right.
and going through my special order catalogs and teaching uh, these uh, these folks about our blinds line. Well, it's no different. I got to teach my team what we're selling. They have to know what it is. Then I've got to motivate them, right? Then I actually have to say, okay, if you do well, you're going to make more money, or I'm going to give you a really cool experience. We've sent some of our golf shop teams to Vegas. We had a beverage cart team go on a cruise. We put together a whole sales program for the beverage cart, and we did it as both individually and collectively as teams. What we found is when we really lit it up is when we started having the team buy in together. They were all part of something, you know. And we found that if we were a little bit over the top in what we were trying to use to motivate them, it motivated them even more.
And
And
so,
that is really what that's really kind of, so the last piece of the puzzle is, having the right product in terms of your facility, right? Having the right product in terms of what you're offering, part of that sale. And last but not least, educating and empowering a group of people to go sell it.
yeah, I love it. I love it. And I love the story you talked about, the big, hairy, audacious goal and having that bag. And I mean, when Scott and we were involved in a recognition program, at the year end, we sent someone to Mexico at some point, like where we had, we'd use supplier points, we use credit card miles. Like there's lots of ways to do it that is not like you're writing a check for $4,000. But what I loved about what you were telling the story at the Golf Inc. The GBC conference was that it seemed to me that this team prize of going to Vegas or going on a cruise or whatever, you set this very lofty goal, but you recognize that you were going to invest a large percentage, not more than 50%, but a large percentage of the profit of that goal to the team. You wouldn't have achieved that without them, right? It's new revenue, but also it also, I think, enhances camaraderie. It creates customer satisfaction. I mean, people forget about how all these other things spin off into other revenue. It's like
It's part of retaining your employees.
Retaining your employees, 100%.
Yeah. So we usually set goals that are very achievable, because what you don't want to do is set a goal that is not really that achievable, and then produce a culture of failure.
Yeah. No.
So you need to start with something that's achievable and have an incentive based on that.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, I call it the BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yeah.
Something that you're going, this is just stupid. And if we hit it, I'm going to do something stupid for these guys.
Yeah.
We've got one club. I think we set the BHAG to where every dues dollar that we collect beyond the BHAG belongs to them. 100% of those dues dollars belong to them for a year.
Wow.
But by the way, I grew my own, right? My own bucket grew by 30, 40%. They kept it going.
Right.
And so, and in 12 months, that money, that compounding effect, if you will,
Exactly.
well, that goes into my business, right?
But I
you have
think
to get there by motivating people.
The lesson that I would love the listeners to take from this is, and you talk about selling, blinds to Lowe's and you talk about sales culture, right? Is that we don't, in general, I'm generalizing, in general, as operators, we don't invest enough time and energy and money into creating our people, to helping our people become salespeople. We don't have enough incentives, generally speaking. We don't give them enough product knowledge, generally speaking. We don't have a structure. We sometimes we don't even make it comfortable for them to sell, where they feel like they're allowed to sell people and get $200 of their money out of their pocket to buy a pair
How
of golf.
about even having the availability to sell,
Right.
meaning staffing correctly? I mean, if I've got a guy who, I can tell you when I've worked the counter by myself and the phone's ringing, I got a line of people, the phone rings, I got to pick it up. I used to pick the phone up, stick it in my pocket so I didn't forget to, get back on it, finish checking the person in, then grab that call off a hold.
Yeah.
And my favorite was when I was working the shop, the manager would come in on Monday and go, "Man, you made a lot of sales this weekend." This is back, I was selling a frequent player card. And he said, "How do you do it?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I let the line pile up." He goes, "What?" "Yeah," I said, "I let the line pile up." And then I say really loud to the entire golf shop. I said, "Hey, everybody, this will go real fast if I can just have your attention." Okay. And I would give him my spiel.
Right.
And I'd say, "If you'd like to buy," because I had a nice long counter there,
Yeah.
I'd put out, 5 applications and 5
Right.
pens and say, "Come over here, press hard, third copy is yours,
Right.
I'll have your card for you when you get done,
Right.
and make $50 just like that because I get $10 a card."
Right.
So
Right.
when I got hired at $9 an hour to check people in and answer the phones, my goal is to make $20 an hour.
Right. Well, and as simple as that, we don't give enough opportunities for our frontline hourly staff to make commission or to participate in that kind of process. So
That's right.
I got time for one last question, Pat.
You got it.
If one of our listeners or one of our watchers could implement kind of one thing in the next 30 days that you think would have the kind of biggest impact on their revenue, like we talked about so many things today, so many great things, analysis and utilization and sales culture and stuff like that. But if someone could implement one thing, what advice would you give them?
I would separate your range ball sales from practice bucket to warm up bucket. Okay.
Wow.
All right. And
I
the
didn't see that coming.
reason I say that is a lot of times I get pushback from folks on some of these ideas, right? Oh, the range does X in revenue.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how much of that revenue is actually practice revenue, and how much of it's warm up revenue?
Okay.
Okay. Because you're not going to cannibalize the warm up revenue.
Okay.
You might cannibalize a little bit of your practice range ball revenue.
So keep going.
So study it for 30 days. Understand the difference between the two so that you have the confidence to then potentially put together the right kind of programming for your range.
So the idea being that there are people there to warm up. I got 5 minutes before I've got my tee time because I've already shown up late because everyone shows up late and they got to hit 25 balls just to make sure their back doesn't hurt on hole number 1. And then you got the guy that's beating balls for an hour that wants the 100 ball bucket. So are you talking about understanding who's who in the zoo so that you can price your products accordingly?
Correct.
And to make sure that you have a warm-up price of 25 balls and a ball beater price of 100 balls?
Correct.
And that if you have that pricing appropriate, you'll drive more driving range revenue.
Well, it'll give you some confidence to say, well, maybe there's a different way to do this.
Right.
Maybe I can create a membership product that includes utilization of the range. Maybe it's unlimited. Maybe it's a bucket. Maybe you don't, right? So I'd say really the one thing you can do in the next 30 days is just start to manage, start to analyze,
100%.
start to look at your data, start
By the
there.
way, one of the most important numbers that many people don't have is the number of range balls hit per day. They don't even have a counter that's effective in their ball dispenser or they got a whole bunch of people that get access to the balls, teachers, a variety of other things that don't go through the process. that can just grab buckets. And I agree with you. Managing the driving range and ball count is a significant number one, significant revenue source, but number two is can tell you a lot of things about what's going on your golf course.
Yeah, because it then layers against pulling your utilization reports out of your tee sheets.
Yeah, love it.
And knowing where your opportunities are.
Pat, so many great nuggets. We're going to package this up. Our listeners are going to be able to listen to it, take things apart. There's so many different great lessons there. If anyone wanted to kind of reach out to you and talk to you about your consulting business or understand a bit more about Advanced Golf Partners, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, drop me a note. I have a very sophisticated email address, ptkelley22@gmail.com. So my consulting arm is Deep Dive Golf Consulting. Advanced, you'll see Larry's on there these days, the way that we're kind of presenting ourselves. But that's probably the best way to do it. I'll reach out to you and you can get a hold of me.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we'll post your information down low, but anyone will be able to find you. But just awesome stuff, Pat. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
You got it, James. Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. As always, it's great to have you on our live Q&A call. And as always, in the future, we will see you on the inside